Today on Put 'em on the Couch, your host Jason McCoy and co-host Nelson Beaulieu discuss politics, political science, and what makes the two different. Democracy. Is it the best form of government, or is it just the least worst? And is there any reason to believe that this experiment we call America necessarily has to continue into the future? You're listening to Put 'em on the Couch, American Government Edition. Here we go. Jason McCoy alongside my friend, confidant, and fellow educator,
Nelson Beaulieu.
Nelson, the poli-sci guy. Today on the show, I want to investigate this concept of poli-sci. Hey, man, speaking of which, if there were a such thing as a truth serum debate and the Republican candidates were to go on stage and reveal exactly what they were thinking, what do you think Ron DeSantis would say? That's what I thought.
I'm really this awkward. it's not a put on. I'm really this awkward.
Nice.
Yeah, I would love a truth serum debate I'd like a rerun debate, like bring all the 2016 guys back.
Yeah.
Or, bring some 2020 guys on there, bring like Mitch McConnell on there.
Yeah.
I would love a truth serum debate where instead of defending President Trump when they're asked about his ridiculous behavior or some bizarre, stupid tweet that he just put out, it would be fun to see them be like, oh, man, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. Because they're thinking it.
Of course.
They're thinking it. And it's sad. It's intellectually dishonest.
And speaking of thinking, I can't wait to hear exactly what you think about political science and politics.
Well, I'm more excited to hear what you think about the psych behind all this stuff, but it'll be fun.
Yeah, let's get to that right after these messages.
Let's put politics on the couch.
Let's do it.
Hey, do you know about the USA? Do you know about the government? Can you tell me about the Constitution? Hey, learn about the USA.
That was a psych out. We don't have any messages.
No, politics. That we're just priming the space for future ads.
That's
no,
right.
I'm just kidding, man. I mean, it just seems like the
I'm
right thing
priming
to
the
do.
space for future ads.
It just seems like the right thing to do, to carve out a little space, a little break for the audience to decide whether or not they want to keep going or they want to change to another
do you
episode.
track the analytics? Do people drop us after that little intro break?
Honestly, man, they don't even make it to that break. we got to get people to actually click in the beginning.
It's a shame. It's good music.
Yeah, it is good music. I will say we've got some good music. Hey, listen, man, today
politics.
I want to talk about politics, political
Absolutely,
science.
Man.
You're the poli-sci guy, and in a former episode, both you and I interviewed one another, and you in particular got into what got you into politics, what got you into the study of political science and what that was all about. So I don't want to rehash all of the old stuff, but I do think for the audience who are maybe just tuning in just because of the title of this show today, that they learn exactly how a political scientist defines politics. So as a political scientist, how would you define politics?
I mean, politics is really all about conflict resolution, right? Anytime you have a battle over shared resources or anytime there's a battle over something of value. I mean, if you go to work and there's a schedule, right? There's going to be politics involved.
Okay.
If you go to work and there's a duty or a detail that somebody wants or doesn't want, there's politics involved, office politics. Anytime there is anything that has to be divided, anytime there is a shared resource, we're going to have politics. And we've had it since the beginning of civilized history, likely before that. But since we've had civilization, since the first civilizations began in the Fertile Crescent, we've had politics associated with them, and not only associated with them, but they're fundamental. They are required for a functioning civilization.
So with that, anybody within earshot of your voice, my voice, can identify politics.
Anybody.
They're seriously everywhere, politics.
Everywhere.
So why do you need political science then? What's the value of that?
Well, it's like anthropology. It's like any other social science, right? It's to me, it really boils down to that question of who are we? That ever fascinating question of why is human behavior done the way it's done? What is it about our species that makes us unique, that makes us different? And politics, to me, was just one of those clear examples, right? There's not politics really in the animal world. There might be conflict resolution, but there's not.
Well, I think ecologists, primatologists
they
in
might
particular
disagree,
would probably
right?
disagree.
They might
say there's
disagree.
hierarchical
But hey,
structures
look,
in
I'm a speciesist,
these
baby.
living societies. Yeah.
I'm a speciesist.
Well, here I'm gonna.
Well, that is
I'm
true,
gonna
though,
hold your
right?
feet to the
There
fire a
are
little bit.
primatologists.
Yeah. I want to hold your feet to the fire a little bit. You said that it's about studying people, and that's a pretty generic example. Let's drill down, if you could, and unpack that. What are some specific questions you, as a political scientist, have pondered or like to ponder about politics, about how people?
One area of focus for me is the efficacy of certain types of governments. I think it might sound a little esoteric.
Everybody
right?
knows democracy, capitalism's number one, right?
Well, capitalism is an economic system.
Yeah, okay. Well, everybody knows
married to
democracy is number one,
I
right?
suppose. Yeah, you see, I've
It's
always
the best version of government except all others.
according
Wait a minute.
to that's Winston
It's
Churchill.
the worst. It's the worst form of government except all others.
It's the worst form of government except all the others. And I
Certainly makes you want to rally behind it, doesn't it?
yes and no.
Yeah.
It depends on how you study the others, what you think of the other. Is there something inherently more moralistic, more effective about a democracy? I don't know. I think that's a bold statement. I don't know that.
Is it true that we're the oldest living democracy on Earth? I hear that banted about by quite a bit.
How do you want to answer that? It depends how you.
How could it be? We're only a couple hundred years old.
We are
right?
the oldest presidential style democracy on Earth.
Anybody a close second?
No.
Okay.
Now, a lot of political scientists, and you can include me among them, regard American presidential style democracy as the country's most dangerous export.
Wow.
Only one presidential style democracy in history has lasted longer than 151 years, and it's ours.
How about that?
Argentina lasted, I think Argentina was like 152, so I might be a little off with the numbers. But Argentina.
So if we're looking at just pure staying power, is it
presidential style democracy? Our style democracy does not stay very long.
Is it safe to say that it's an experiment that continues? We don't really know. 151 years and counting, right?
Well, ours has gone on for 237 years, but that's the 1787 date.
Yeah, that version.
Which is the appropriate date to use when you're talking about how long the country has existed.
But compared to some other styles, we are in our infancy.
Yeah, I would say that's true.
I mean, the Roman Empire lasted how long? And they had a pretty...
Well, you got to break it up between the imperial. See, you don't spend enough time thinking about the Roman Empire.
But I'm assuming that even if you looked at a particular sub form of government within the Roman Empire, it's still 10 times longer than ours has gone on.
Not 10, but the imperial period lasted longer than our republic certainly has.
And I'm assuming it was a strong arm. It was a pretty authoritarian approach, right?
Yes and no. I mean, it was authoritarian, and a lot of it depended on the ruler at the time. But even the most sadistic Roman emperors had their fans.
So I think you know where I'm going. I mean, if you looked at all the governments that have ever sort of been in place on the earth, at least in recorded history.
Yeah, could we say that ours is better?
No. We can clearly say that ours has lasted not that long.
Not that
right?
long.
However, we don't know if it's better, right?
I
guess it depends on how you define better. I mean, there are plenty dictatorial, authoritative, fascist governments that have lasted longer, but the question is, how do you define better?
Right. That's absolutely right.
I mean, is there a way to define better where we wouldn't come out on top?
I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is. And again, when I said that our presidential style democracy, right? And so what I mean when I say that, not a parliamentary system. When a young country adopts ours, what they find inevitably and invariably is that the executive has too much power in our system.
Whoa. I thought there were checks and balances. That's just one of the three arms of government, isn't it?
There are, but in a modern society, it's very easy for executives to claim emergency powers, to enhance their powers,
so claim
and to
powers
quickly
that may not be formalized or codified.
Sure. And when you look at our system, right, we have the shortest governing document anywhere in the entire world. The state constitution of Vermont is twice as long as the U.S. Constitution.
Why do you think that is?
I
Were the founders just being humble, modest?
I think they were.
Or they lacked imagination?
I think part of it
Trying
might
to
have
get
been
it
they
done
were
quickly.
they're in a hurry, right?
Yeah, they procrastinated for long enough.
Yeah, but the Articles of Confederation were just a complete disaster. And I mean, how long can you go without a government, right? So they
Right.
needed to come up with something. And I think I don't think the fact that ours has lasted the longest and the fact that it's the oldest governing document in the world, or I don't think the fact that ours is the oldest governing document in the world and the fact that it's the shortest, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think those two things are connected. I think they rely on each other. We have a long history, going back to our colonial period, our founding period, of political involvement. We have a strong political culture, and I think that political culture, our political norms, allowed our government to be successful where other governments might fail. If they don't have that bedrock of participation, of political knowledge, I don't think it's nearly as an effective system. You have to have an understanding and a respect for norms. And I will add, as the United States really has been backsliding in terms of our democratic principles over the last decade plus, we see some problems in our own system. Problems that have always been there, but they've been controlled by the norms. And now that we seem to care less about those norms, we're running into problems.
Yeah. Well, speaking of running into problems, we've got plenty of them to go around, both nationally and locally. I've always heard that, you really shouldn't worry so much about presidential elections. You shouldn't follow national politics. And if you're going to, you should always remember that it's local politics where, the rubber really meets the road. And if you want change in your own personal life, you should be way more enthusiastic about your local Board of Education or your local county commission. What do you think about that? Is that true?
Yes and no.
Yeah. What do people mean by that, do you think?
I mean, certainly at local levels, you can have a more immediate impact and more, depending on what state you're in, I suppose, what system you're in.
I mean, is it just a ruse to get people to accept higher taxes on their property?
I love taxes. I love tax. I don't know why people hate taxes. I love taxes.
What a politician. I was going to say, how can you convince me that you're a politician without telling me you're a politician? That right there.
So
I love taxes.
I love taxes.
Is the craziest thing I've ever heard from any guest in my entire life.
So I'll tell you just a true story.
No. Go back first and then tell me that one, though. I was asking about whether or not local politics really are as important.
Yeah, they're as important.
More important.
I wouldn't say they're more important. They're as important. I would say they become more important depending upon, and this is obviously dependent upon your personal political view. But if the party that you support is out of power nationally, I think they become much more important to you then, right? Because let's say you are a Democrat and the Republicans are in power. President Trump is back in office,
right,
and there's this slackening of regulations and requirements at the federal level for environmental protections. Okay, well, those are just recommendations and regulations. You don't have to go to the bottom, right?
I got you.
So we might want to really focus our state and our local officials
on beefing up
environmental
the regulation
protections
and clean water and clean air.
Absolutely. So I think in that context, it becomes more important. The same thing with education, right? If
I was going to ask that next question.
If Ron DeSantis becomes president and wants to introduce Florida curriculum standards
so what you're saying is there'll be fewer books to read for our students
fewer books.
in elementary, middle, and high school.
There'll be the same amount of books, but they'll be the right books. The right books. They won't be the left books.
So any parent out there right now that's listening to our voices, what would you say if they said, look, I got one vote to give this upcoming election. Should I vote for my local school board, or should I wait to take time off work and go vote in the presidential election? Which one is going to potentially impact my kids' immediate day-to-day life in the school the most?
I mean, if you're worried about their day-to-day life in the school, I'd probably, I'll tell you what I'd do. I'd say, what grade is your kid in?
Okay, 4th.
I'd vote in the presidential election.
I got you. 12th grade.
I'd vote in presidential election.
Okay. Middle schooler.
I'd vote in the local school board election.
Why is that?
Because it takes time for the national environment to filter down locally.
Okay.
It takes time for national directives to filter down locally.
Okay.
But when they do, they can have a much bigger impact. In terms of immediacy, I definitely say, okay, we'll vote in your local school board. And even there, it takes time, right? I mean, I was on a board for 4 years. It probably took 2 years before our policies were really felt. So if you're a senior in high school, vote in the presidential election.
Oh, the slow, clunky sort of grind of the bureaucratic machine.
I said felt. I didn't say implemented.
That's interesting. So you said, that you like taxes. Do you also
taxes.
like the word bureaucracy
I do.
and also like waiting in long lines?
I love lines. No, I hate lines
Like a
as much.
perfect politician.
I hate lines as much as everybody else, but the fact that a lot of people use government services doesn't make them inherently ineffective. In fact, I think the opposite is true.
So you don't think there's anything inherently wrong with the way the government oversees itself or regulates itself or puts these bureaucratic wheels in place, right? Like we always hear these stereotypes that government institutions don't do it as well. They're not as good stewards of.
Yeah, but look, that's so easy to do. It's all crap. People don't fully understand the Leviathan, this giant thing that is government, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't understand all the ways that the federal government effectively interacts in our everyday lives. 2 days ago, right, we missed school. We had this huge storm, right?
Yeah.
Did you know it was coming?
Yeah.
How'd you know it was coming?
Because honestly, the weather told me.
The National Weather Service does a pretty good job of forecasting these things and telling us when there's going to be trouble.
Oh, no doubt. And they're connected with the government, right?
Yeah. Well, everybody said, let's get rid of the Commerce Department. Really?
Yeah,
Like,
nobody.
really?
I don't hear them say
We're going
that.
to get rid of the National Weather Service?
They typically want to get rid.
I want to keep the
They
National Weather
typically
Service.
want to get rid of the any kind of government regulation over water, air. So you'll hear about Department of Environmental, whatever.
Well, it's, the EPA.
Yeah, the EPA, and they'll want to get rid of the anything dealing with education, the education department.
Right.
I do hear those kinds of things, right?
Yeah, but people don't understand what those departments do. They just know that's a department. It sounds big. I don't get it.
But politicians know. Let's.
Of course they do.
They know
well,
for
some
a fact.
do. Some do.
I mean, real politicians,
No.
not the ones in the suits,
No, some do.
but the ones that have actually studied history and civics and different forms of
So
government. Don't you think they know?
I talked to a local politician whose name you would know. He sits in the North Carolina State Legislature. And he said, it's funny. The first couple days, I said, man, what's it like to actually go into the state cap? What's it like to be
surrounded with all of these great minds, these wonderful political thinkers?
Yeah, I was thinking about Hamilton with the room where it happened. I love that song, man. With Aaron
You
Burr.
guys just start dancing and singing right away?
I tried to get him to dance, but he wasn't having it.
Schoolhouse Rock. That's how it's made.
So we said, man, what is it like to be in the room,
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I'll tell you, the first couple days, you will look around that state capitol building and you'll think, man, how did I get here? How did I get here? And then you'll be there for a few weeks and you'll look around the room and you'll say, man, how the hell did these other people get here? Because they're just as stupid. I mean, I don't mean to be disrespectful.
Now, are they as bad as our, we joke about this a lot. Are they as bad as that conspiratorial uncle at the Thanksgiving dinner who we really don't want to be there, but since, they're in the family, they have to.
I get the sense that some are, most are. I get the sense that some are true believers, some really believe this stuff. And I would put their number about 10%. And I think a lot of the other people, I'm talking now like about Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, men that, I think from a distance are really intelligent people. They're full of shit.
Yeah.
They're absolutely full of shit.
They know better.
And it's gross.
Yeah.
That stuff is gross.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know how to fix it. I think it's always been there.
Well, that was what Chris Christie basically admitted, I think,
Chris
yesterday.
was one of those
Chris
guys.
Christie was one of those.
He was
admitted
gross.
as much last night, I think. He said when he was interviewed, dropped out of the presidential race, wasn't in the debate. He didn't get enough support. He was never going to get enough support, no matter what he did, honestly. And they asked him, they're like, why wait this long? What was going on? I mean, you seemed to support Trump at one point. And he said, ambition.
Yeah,
wow. Like he admitted it. He said that.
But I've also seen him a lot of times just blame Trump for he was different.
Yeah.
He was different. Well, I mean, I've been watching President Trump a long time.
I've never known him
seen
to
him
be
different to me.
Right.
But okay,
now he said some things that were completely the opposite of what I'd heard him in interviews say before he got into politics. But nevertheless,
so look, we can start and I'd love to get your perspective on this because I think it's important when we get into party. I do have an empathy. I do feel bad for people who are losing their tribe. or going against their tribe, going against their group.
Right.
I have a lot of respect for somebody like Governor Romney, Mitt Romney, Senator Romney, rather. This was the guy who was nominated for the presidency from the Republican Party in 2012, the leader of the Republican Party. And he not only refused to support President Trump in 2016, right? Think about that.
Yeah.
The candidate for one party, 4 years later, he refuses to give any support for the nominee. He actively worked against that nominee. He did everything he could to make sure that nominee didn't become the president. And in a lot of ways, I think he's, actions he's taken since voting to impeach the president, he's lost this party. And I've always wondered if I could do that.
Yeah, I think if you had a tribe that was more important, you probably could. For instance, Romney will never lose the tribe that matters most to him. His Mormon constituency, his larger Mormon family. Right? The fact that he's a senator from Utah really does help. He's been a staple in the Mormon church for a very, very long time. And so I always thought, when he was kind of going against the political tide, I thought to myself, well, how many of his true loyalists is he going to lose, right? Like he can only win votes. He can't lose any new ones. I mean, he can lose new ones. But he can't lose his base. His base are the Mormons. I mean, he's going to get...
No, he's not running for re-election.
Not now, yeah.
He likely would have lost, I believe he would have lost in a primary at this point.
In Utah?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
No, I think he would have. I think he absolutely would have. And I think he knew that. But here's the thing, that's a painful... When I was in office, we had a lot of focus and a lot of attention. And maybe it wasn't. Maybe it's always this way, but it felt like a lot of extra attention.
Yeah.
On the Board of Education. And I lost a lot of good friends and a lot of people that supported me.
Were they really good to begin with, though?
I thought they were.
Yeah.
I thought they were. And it was painful. I lost friends when I think the biggest wound was losing people who had supported me when I voted to open the schools.
Right, during COVID.
Because I had a lot of support from teachers, and they were people that I worked very hard to make. I wanted to make their lives better. I wanted to make policies that would make their lives better. We got a huge raise for the teacher. We got our teachers in New Hanover County were the number one paid teachers when I was in office. It was a big raise I was really proud of that. But when I voted to open the schools back up, I lost so much support.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was the right thing to do, and my Democratic colleagues were very upset with me, and my Republican colleagues were not happy. I was the only person to vote that way, and it was really painful. I felt alone. I felt like, I'd been in Democratic politics in New Hanover County since I moved here in 2008. I started going to meetings, started volunteering, worked on Obama's campaign, door knocking in 12. Ran for office in 16. Like it was a base of support for me. I thought I had a lot of good friends, and to lose so many of them, and it wasn't just that. There were a number of times where I just said, "Look, I'm sorry, but the party is wrong, in my opinion, and I have to do what I believe is right."
I think that leads to maybe a larger question. It's if you are a politician, either locally or nationally, what is your role really? Is it to simply parrot back what the majority of your constituents
That's a good question.
want?
That's a good question.
Is it to use what you've learned and use your own wisdom and experience and try to make the best, most informed decisions on behalf of the majority of your constituents? Or is it trying to raise all ships and look out for everyone, even the ones who don't support you, right? Like, who are your constituents and how much power should they really have?
That's a great question. And, we have three types of representatives or politicians that we sort of look at and categorize in political science.
Okay.
We have your trustees.
Okay.
And your trustees are people who believe that the vote that they have been given is representative of a trust, right? And so what they will do is they will act in the best interest as far as they can tell
as they
understand it, right? There are representatives, okay, people who just represent the will of their constituents and believe that, look, the constituents sent me here. This is what they believe by and large, and this is what I'm going to reflect.
Okay.
And then there are your politicos, your Frank Underwoods, people who love the game.
And Frank Underwood, for those of you that don't know, it's from that
Hey,
amazing
everybody
Netflix
knows.
series
Don't
that was on for a couple seasons
Kevin
until
Spacey,
Kevin Spacey got accused of doing some
untoward.
untoward
Hey,
things.
wasn't he like acquitted though?
Maybe he
Or
paid.
something? He didn't do anything.
No, I don't know if he did or not. I do know he was acquitted in terms of like the criminal case, but I think civilly he paid or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I think he's not in jail or anything, right?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Look, he was a good actor.
Yeah,
No, he was a good actor. I thought that was a good show.
it was a fascinating series. What was it called again?
House of Cards.
House of
House of
Cards.
Cards.
Yeah,
But,
great title.
But here's the way I
So
look
you've
at
got politicos.
politicos, trustees, and representatives. And here's the way, or I'm sorry.
Yeah, what's the
I should
similarity
say
and difference? Yeah,
delegates.
yeah.
Delegates. I don't mean trustees.
Okay,
Or
delegates.
representatives. Delegates.
That's okay.
So the way I look at it is this, right?
Mm-hmm.
When somebody gives me, and this is the way I interpreted my election, people can't possibly know, the average person can't possibly be expected to look at a $263 million budget and figure out what goes where, how it's supposed to be spent. There is a school of thought, which I subscribe to, which is, look, the same way a doctor does not listen to his patient solely, right? The same way a doctor isn't going to override his diagnosis because his patient says it's cancer.
Yeah.
Right. The same way a lawyer shouldn't take his client's advice on how to defend his case. The same way a politician, I don't believe, should simply listen to the will of the voter. Now, that might seem elitist to some, but how do we expect our citizens to completely understand the global nuances and complexities of a climate treaty? How are you can't do that.
Well,
We have 435 representatives in the House of Congress, 100 senators, and those are the people we elect. And we elect them not based on what we want. We elect them based on who they are and what they say they will do. And so to me, that's why character is the most important thing.
That illustrates the point quite well. But what would you say to those who say, well, look, doctors have the fancy medical degrees.
Yeah.
They have stethoscopes, medicine, MRI machines that help them do their work so that their work is standardized and controlled and valid and reliable. Politicians, I mean, you just have theories, right? Like
theories.
What do you say to people that say, come on, man, political science, like where's the science behind it anyway? What makes your decision-making process any better than, my crazy uncle at the dinner table?
Nothing. Nothing except the fact that I do it full time.
No, I see.
As a politician, what do you do for work?
Yeah,
you go to school every day and you teach and you have to prep classes and I know you have to grade and then you have to answer those god awful emails every 4 months about students who never worked at all but really, really care and take their grades seriously.
Right? Or people who believe that they know better than I do about how particular things work in human nature. Yeah. And
then what else do you have to do, right? You have to do the kid thing and the dog thing, and you got to do all sorts of things.
Well, I can tell you as a both educator and a person who majored in psychology at the graduate level. I won't call myself a psychologist, but I think I have one advantage over the average person when it comes to trying to understand human behavior. And it isn't my theories or my education. It's the fact that I am comfortable saying I don't know. I'm comfortable starting with a question as opposed to starting with a conclusion and finding evidence that sticks or supports that conclusion. I figured you would say something like that regarding, your political science background as well. Like most political scientists wear the suits and they do seem a bit elitist from the outside. But when you really get right down to it,
don't confuse political
politicians with political
scientists.
science.
Yeah. Political science is an academic pursuit. It's theoretical.
Thank you for that. Yeah, let's explore that.
Politics is very different.
Hey, let's take a break, get your thoughts together, and I'll get some of my questions together, and we'll explore that distinction: politics
versus political science. All right, cool. Let's do it.
Shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey, yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I'ma get a scholarship.
So yeah, on the other side of the break, we were talking about, what makes a political scientist, strategist, politician, someone in the world of politics more equipped, better at making decisions about how to spend money, use resources than say your crazy uncle. I mean, you were given an analogy or a comparison when I asked a question earlier about you said that the doctor knows better than the patient, despite the fact the patient is very fervent and has maybe studied done their own research, air
Sure.
quotes. The doctor's still not going to change their cancer diagnosis, but in fairness, the doctor has blood work, stethoscopes, science, as it were, on
Actual
their side.
science.
Actual science.
Actual science.
Again, what would you say to someone who says, well, is political science really science? And you said, yeah, there's a difference between political scientists and politicians. Tell us what you mean.
Yeah, so definitely I would say political science is, I want to be careful how I phrase it. No, I don't think it's an actual science. I think a lot of
But it's not a show.
no, it's not a show.
Okay.
No, it's not a show. It's an academic pursuit. It's, I think
Because
it's,
that's what I think a lot of people think about when they think about politics, is that it's a show.
It's
That
not a
there doesn't
show.
have to be anything that's honest about it.
Politics can be a show.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Politics
Politics for
can
sure.
be a show.
I mean,
Yeah.
you hear it all the time. You're like, well, this person has to play politician if they want to win the primary,
Right.
suggesting that primary voters are extreme and crazy and just want drama.
Right.
But if
Wh-
they're going
what
to
we
win
do-
if they're going to win the real election, they've got to be more honest and be more true to the science and true to
So
fact.
what I would say as a political scientist, what I'm interested is in studying the primary voters, studying the primary process, studying the general election voters,
Okay.
the general election process, the different methods that people use when making a candidate selection,
So answering why these things happen, under what circumstances.
studying all of that,
Yeah.
and studying the politicians
Yeah.
as well, certainly. But politics can absolutely be a show. Over half of the people in Congress, well, not over, just under half now, but it goes back and forth. But a lot of those people have law degrees. They have backgrounds in law.
Mhm.
So which is helpful, obviously, when making law. I think it's very helpful.
Right.
But they spend their full-time job is doing that. And that's, I think that's where their expertise comes from. But there's a lot of wisdom in the masses, which is why we select from ourselves, right? Anybody can do it. I'm not saying what I do is just like anybody can be a doctor. Anybody can do these things.
I don't know. I don't know if just anybody can be a politician, right? I mean, Ron DeSantis comes to mind. He may be relatively learned. He may be, quite smart, have a history background, and behind closed doors, I'm sure he's really good with his family, talking one-on-one. But
He's
when he
the
gets out
governor of
there
the
on
state of Florida.
when he gets out
Who are you?
on the stump, come
Come on, he's the
man.
governor, dude.
Arnold Schwarzenegger was a governor. So was Jesse the Body Ventura, for God's sake.
Arnold Schwarzenegger was actually a very effective and popular governor.
No doubt. You said it right there. Popular.
Well, isn't
Popular.
that important?
Well, I think so. That's just it. That's what I'm talking about. You don't have to be smart to be popular. And you don't have to be, you certainly probably
You're a
aren't going to be
psych guy.
popular. just
Aren't you
because you're smart.
diminishing popularity?
No.
You're acting like it's got no value or it's not important. Popularity is
I
important.
think it's fool's gold.
Fool's gold. Come
Yeah.
on now.
Now, if you have people behind you that are helping you come to the right decisions and you're just the face, you're just the puppet, maybe it's okay, right? Like, I think people were okay with George W. Bush because he had Karl Rove's brain behind him. And that might be why so many people are displeased with Trump. It's like there doesn't seem to be
A brain.
anybody running the show behind
Oh,
Trump.
there's plenty of people. He's actually running.
Well, that's why I think
very-
it's going to be more frightening this time around if he wins.
He's running a very effective and deliberate campaign as opposed
for
to
sure.
his monkey throwing feces 2016.
Yeah. Well, last time he didn't understand how the wheels of government turned.
I don't know if he
This
understands
time-
how they how
well,
they
he's
he
got
probably has a better
people
idea.
who do. Yeah.
Yeah, he's probably got a better idea, but he certainly understands how campaigns work this time. He's run a very effective campaign.
Yeah.
So I was asking you a little bit earlier
Sure.
about the tribe and the tribal nature of politics.
Yeah.
And what do you see from
Well,
a
I want to
psychological
go back. You
perspective?
said that that only humans sort of deal in these kinds of tribes.
Yeah,
and
I
how-
guess that's not true.
No, I just want to say that, yeah, I mean, primatologists, people who study
Yeah.
ants, like entomologists, that's entomologists, really the study of bugs or whatever, insects, not just ants. But E.O. Wilson, who you're probably familiar with, I think he's He may still be alive, and if he's not, he recently died, over 100 years old. He's the sociobiology guy, and when he was growing up, he had very poor vision. Very smart guy. I mean, he was a professor at Harvard for like 40 years. Wrote many books, Consilience. He basically penned the sociobiology theory, but this guy had to study ants because it was something that he could see without having too much. It's the smallest of the small organisms that he could study without having great vision. He had bad vision.
That's cool.
But he learned a lot about how humans behave. He created his sociobiological theory based upon the study of how ants behave.
Right.
And
that's interesting.
So he actually has a very nice documentary that he did with, I think, PBS Frontline or something. I've shown it, some clips in different classes over the years, called Of Ants and Men. And he does a very nice job of illustrating tribalism from the insect world all the way up to the human world.
Wow.
Both in politics and athletics. He's an alumni of Alabama. And so he's at like one of those Alabama-Auburn football games.
Okay.
The Iron Bowl, I think it's called, as people are really like going at each other's throats.
Yeah, I lived in Alabama for 2 years. They actually shut down. Like the state literally shuts down
seriously
for that game.
But he talks about tribalism, and that's, I think that's what maybe an ecologist would refer to what's going on with Republicans versus Democrats, right? Left versus right.
But what's going on mentally?
In psychology, I would argue it's just what we call group polarization. And I think in politics, you guys call it identity politics. But I think it's kind of all the same. As a psychology person, I would say group polarization, which grew out of the social psychological subdiscipline of psychology, is this idea that you can take two people, right, who pretty much get along and have almost identical beliefs on everything. You can sit them down, and then you can separate them and put them in two different groups.
Okay.
And by the way, the two different groups they end up just have very tiny differences, just tiny disagreements, right? So you and I could agree on everything. You and I basically move into two different groups, and we spend all of our time in these two different groups. And even though these two different groups are very close together still, if we stay in our own groups and we never are allowed to talk, we stay in our own, quote, echo chambers, as I think some politicians refer to it, we will begin to move further and further apart.
Yeah.
We call that group polarization.
Yeah, political scientists are very familiar with some of those studies because we have done that before, where we take liberal people and conservative people, and we don't put them in
in two different camps, right? You put them in the same camp.
Well, we put them in two different rooms, and we just let them talk. And what we find is the moderate liberals or the moderate conservatives, the less conservatives of the group, will become more and more conservative.
Right, they become
they
more extreme.
They all end up aligning. So we are aware of that.
Now
phenomenon.
I'm more interested in whether or not you can put it back together.
I don't
fascinated
know.
by this.
I don't know.
Well, I think when we talked about community in here, I kind of hinted at it.
See, I think you could put it back together.
I started living in this neighborhood I'm currently in, right? 10
Yeah.
years ago, let's say. And when I moved here, there were political signs in people's yards. There were all kinds of literal and metaphorical signs within my community that said, man, you're in the wrong place. There's no way you're going to fit in because none of your beliefs, none of your goals in life, nothing you believe is going to align with this community. Now, that didn't stop me. When we had picnics, barbecues, Halloween, parties, I just begrudgingly went to these things, kept an open mind, brought along my kids, brought along my covered dish, a couple beers, and really tried to talk about things that I felt like are going to be no-brainers. They weren't going to give people room for polarization. And lo and behold, I had a great time. And I genuinely believe that 9 out of every 10 people I've met in this neighborhood over 10 years, I consider my friend. I could call on them if I needed them. I trust them. I believe they have my personal best interest in mind. Now, when we go to the polls, do we vote the same way? I bet you we don't.
Yeah, and I think that you can do that on
a small level.
On a micro level.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
But most people don't even try to do it on a micro level, do they? Like I've interviewed people
Oh, sure.
just casually
Sure.
about, well, have you not heard? I mean, people don't do neighborly things anymore.
I mean, yeah, I
people don't
suppose
know
that-
their neighbors.
I
They
suppose-
don't even seem to try to get to know them.
I suppose that's true, but I think if you drill down and everybody's friends, in anybody's given friend group, they're going to be
Some
people
who
who
have
disagree.
staunch
And
disagreements,
that's fine.
Well, I'm talking about taking complete strangers like I did 10 years ago, right? I'm 40 years old. I move into a new neighborhood with
Yeah, I
a
think
new
you could-
wife and become friends with people that were completely different than me.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you could. I think you could probably.
No
do
doubt
that.
I can stay friends with someone, right? Like I've got a lot of friends from my past who,
Well,
man,
I'm
we don't
gonna
have
tell you
hardly
something
anything
else.
in common
I'm going to tell you
except
something else
nostalgia.
too, though. It's a rule of politics. Nothing can be political if it's private behavior. No private behavior can be political because there's no vested public interest.
Talk about that a little bit more. So in your neighborhood,
Yeah.
your differences
Now,
probably won't rise to the kind of level that you would see the mudslinging and the I want to kill you that you would necessarily see at the national level or the state level even.
well, what I mean is your behavior. So if you go to, that's a perfect example, talking about somebody like dying or somebody who's, you're going to a wedding,
Right.
anything. Like personal behavior can't really be political. It's not. There's no battle over a shared resource. There's nothing to
Other than
resolve.
other than mom left my brother more in the will than me or something like that.
Right, but
Yeah.
that's not. That's not purely personal behavior. So
Yeah.
anytime you have a personal act or a personal issue, then it can't be political. But I would warn you,
So
there's
when
a lot
when we share, it's hard to be political, isn't it?
yes,
Right, like
yes, it's
if I've
very
got
hard
a
to be
pool in my
political.
neighborhood and we
And-
all
and when
pay
you
a
create,
HOA fee,
and when you create that intimacy with somebody, you develop a bond with them. And so I think
So
it's
that's
actually
why
a
you
lot
like taxes.
easier.
That's
I
why you
love
like taxes.
God, I love taxes.
so we all pay in, we share this
It's
this
a bond.
responsibility,
It's a
right?
bond.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a teacher who told me that he loved to go to his local community meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and he would go and be like, "Raise my tax." He'd be the only one, raise my taxes.
Really?
'Cause he was a teacher. He wanted the school system. This is in Connecticut.
To be paid
He
more.
wanted the school system.
Better
to have
funded.
and he said all his neighbors would be like, "There he is. He's going up again. Get him, bag
Wow.
him, kick his ass."
Well, I can think if I
I
lived,
like taxes,
if I
though. Come
lived
on,
in a
man.
neighborhood that had an HOA and they took fees, I could see how that might bring us together because in the HOA, it's pretty clear what we're spending the money on most of the time, right? Like, so here's this pool of money, and we've got to do certain things that we all agree upon. We got to keep this pool running. We got to keep our dog park going. We got to keep our yards trimmed, whatever the case may be. I guess at the larger level, it's like we've got this pool of money. It's a lot bigger. And yeah, we know we got to give some to education and some to roads and some to the military and some to this, but exactly how you're supposed to slice it, is that maybe where some of the consternation and some of the problems come into play?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because not everybody's going to agree, right, that
Right, do we give
using
more-
taxes for the school is in the best interest of their personal tax dollars.
Yes.
And isn't that something, though? I mean, like, before I had children, I never once said how much of my check is going to these schools in my local community. I don't have any kids. I mean, it's easy for me to understand why I didn't complain about that. I don't want kids running around uneducated with no prospect of a future, no job, creating chaos. I want them in school,
Right.
especially somebody else's kids who I don't have any control over. I'm not doing any of the parenting. Man.
Yeah, but you bring up an important point.
Mhm.
I don't know where people have somehow gotten the idea, because even there, right, you're rationalizing why it's good for you. Where did we get the idea that we don't have to pay for things we don't like? We have to pay for things we don't. So there was a movie with Will Ferrell, and he's an IRS agent. I can't remember the name of it. But Killing Harold Crick. That's what it is, Killing Harold Crick. So he's an IRS agent, and he goes to this woman's house, and he knocks on the door. He's like, "Yeah, so you didn't pay your taxes?" And she's like, "I paid my taxes." And he's like, "Well, according to this, you paid X and you owed Y." And she goes, "Oh, yeah, I didn't pay those taxes. Like those go to fund." The way I looked at it is those go to fund like military tanks,
And
and I'm a
anti.
pacifist. Like I'm not paying for those.
Right.
And of course that's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
It's like insurance. You don't get to pick and choose what you want and what you need to pay for, because that wouldn't be very good insurance.
Yeah,
right?
try communicating that concept to students, even college students. I don't know about you, but
Hey,
I've
I
had
got it
college
when I
students
was
ask
young.
me for forever, how many days left do I have to miss this class? I'm like, none. They're like, well, I've only taken 1 day off, and I'm like, well, you're not supposed to take any off. They're like, well, no, the syllabus says that I only have to be here 80% of the time. I'm like, no. It
It
says
says
that
you
in order
can't
to be eligible to earn a grade, you have to be here at least 80% of the time. It's not saying, hey, quickly, miss that 20% that you're allowed. They view insurance as something that you should use. I know this to be true because occasionally students will ask me, when are you going to retire, Mr. McCoy? And I'm like, man, am I that bad? Am I that much of a curmudgeon? Do I need to leave now? And they're like, no. Just, you mentioned that you've been here a while. When do you plan on retiring? And I'm like, well, maybe 4 or 5 years, maybe a little sooner if I use my sick leave. And they're like, oh, you can use your sick leave for retirement? I said, yeah, of course. Well, you haven't used your sick leave over the years? I'm like, no, I've been lucky enough to be pretty healthy. And they're like, oh my God, how many sick days do you have? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I've got thousands of hours. And they're like, what? That's paid? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, so you could just take off the whole semester and get paid? I'm like, yeah, pretty much. They're like, why wouldn't you do that? And I'm like, because then I wouldn't have the sick days. They're like, so are you ever going to use them? I'm like, hopefully not.
Yeah,
They're like, that's so crazy. Why would anybody spend money that they're never going to get back? I think that's
so.
what's the angle? What's in it for me?
On the side of the IRS building, I was in 5th grade. I went to my
DC.
class field trip. Because we were in Virginia, so we just went up and back for the day.
Oh, yeah.
So I went up there, my mom, and we were with other families, and we were walking. I was, man, this is incredible. Had that same reaction a lot of kids have when they go to DC, the buildings.
Yeah.
And on the side of the
Engraving and printing office, get that $500 out of the vending machine that's shredded. That was cool.
And at the side of the IRS building is a quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes.
Mm.
And it says, taxes are the price we pay to live in a civilized world.
Wow.
And I said, man,
That's
awesome.
Cool. That's a good quote.
So I read it, and I'm like, oh, cool. I was a 5th grader, right? Another parent was standing next to us, like I said, and the father said, yeah, fuck that guy. And I was like,
what?
And I said, why? And he said, you'll understand when you're older. And I'm like, no, I want to understand now. I said, why? What's wrong with that? He's like, that's the IRS. And I'm like, what is that? What do they do? I'm like, well, they screw people over and take their money. And I'm like, well, there's nuance for you.
So they're not the good guys.
I'm like, there's nuance for you. I'm like, how do they do that? I'm like, and then I was like, I was just asking questions the same way you might ask questions of a priest. I'm asking this guy. And I'm like, why do you say that? And he could never really articulate. It was just, and again, it goes back to this crazy Leviathan, and they weaponize and they do this. I mean, look, I love the IRS, man. I know that's not a popular opinion.
No,
right?
in fact, I was going to ask you, are
contrarian.
you familiar with any of those surveys that ask people, like, who is the least trusted among the following, people that work for the government agencies, or who do you believe is least qualified for being a presidential candidate? Who would you be least likely to vote for?
Yeah.
And it turns out, like, Mormons are pretty low down the list, Jews are low down the list, but atheists are like literally at the top, right above child molester, I think.
Really?
Yeah, when you ask people what would disqualify you from receiving their vote for president,
That's
an
funny.
atheist is literally above child molester. So I was going to ask you.
At least it's above.
Yeah, exactly.
At least it's above.
So I was going to ask you, are you familiar with any studies that have had people sort of rank order their trust or their faith in, or their support for like different government agencies?
But,
is the IRS it's necessarily at the bottom on all of them?
Yes.
Well, I guess legislative body and the legislative body's probably below it.
No, not usually. Sometimes
really? IRS would be below Congress.
Sometimes you've seen it that low on those rank ordered surveys.
I know the Supreme Court used to be really high up there, and they've fallen quite a bit over the past few years.
Well, they've fallen, but in comparison to what, right? Everything has fallen. Trust in the military has fallen.
Yeah, that's true.
So I mean,
are there any you believe that sort of have maintained? We still say, Parks and Recreation, man, they're
not after that show.
I don't think they're called Parks and Recreation. What are they called?
They are Parks and Rec department. We have a Parks and Rec department.
Yeah.
Local government.
I was thinking about the ones that like handle Yellowstone and all those. What do they call that?
The Department of the Interior.
Department of Interior. Yeah. Some of those that I guess we don't know what they do. Maybe they support them and have confidence in them.
Yeah, National Park Service is part of the Department of the Interior.
I know that there's skepticism surrounding the FDA, and I don't know about the FAA. Probably.
Sure, people just when you run a presidential campaign or any campaign for that matter, it's about contrasts, right? And it's low hanging fruit to say that there is a group there that is fucking everything up,
or getting more than they should,
getting more than they should. That's just
mismanaging. Yeah,
it's low hanging fruit. People have been doing it for a very long time now, and it's become pervasive.
Yeah, military gets it a lot. Education gets it a lot.
Sure,
I don't feel like it sticks for the military as much as it does for education, though.
No, not
I
really.
feel like on the one hand, I can sit around and complain about how much money we spend on the military budget. But then in the very next sort of vein, I can be like cheerleading at a Veterans Day parade, right? Like,
sure, yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, look, in terms of modern politics, and I'm not talking about political science, although you can study it, and I enjoy studying it. But in terms of modern politics in the United States and across the Western world, across the developed world, there is a real problem with our politics, the negativity in it, the lack of faith and trust in it, and it's almost like swirling the drain. I don't know how you stop swirling.
Why do you think it is?
I think, again, it goes back to the nature of political campaigning and the value that politicians find in demonizing one another and in demonizing a system that is so large and complex, it's difficult for any one person to fully appreciate or understand.
Definitely an easy way to create contrast, right?
100%.
Now, what do you think? What would you say to those that say, you know what? We used to stand on tree stumps, tree logs, and, try to get people's attention and get people's votes and get people's support. I think they still call it stumping, right? Do you think there's something to that, this idea that with media's expansion, certainly with artificial intelligence, we now have this unprecedented ability, and then possibly this attraction to doing things that may not be on the up and up, may not be completely honest, but we know that it'll help us win. I mean, you think that's part of it?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I said people, I think there's a lot of intellectual dishonesty that.
And isn't it just too easy? Like it seems too easy, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something interesting that might surprise you. What we find, what the political science finds, is that people do not select candidates, whether they admit this to themselves or not, do not select candidates based on policies.
Well, there you go.
We
about
do not,
popularity and about
we select our candidate based on who we like, and then we will actually switch our political beliefs based on what that candidate says. I'm going to give you a great example.
You think it would be the other way around, right?
No,
you think it would be
because,
this guy's awkward and ugly and weird, and
because look,
however, I agree with his policy, so now I'm starting to think he's more attractive and he's more friendly.
We have talked a lot about psychology, and I'm fascinated with the connection between politics and the limbic system, and the system of our brain that drives decision making.
Yeah,
right?
At least has driven decision making for most of animal history, right? Because it's the only part of the brain we had for a while.
Right, and I think I've said I think somebody who does well in politics is likely an effective limbic brain communicator.
Yeah, so if you can drop the F-bomb every now and then unapologetically,
there you go.
Scream,
there you go.
Gesticulate wildly, show a lot of energy.
Yep.
Expand your body parts out to make yourself look bigger and more domineering.
Sure, there's a lot of that.
Don't apologize. Being plain spoken, though, sounds like the opposite. I mean, I hear a lot of people saying, well, I like that politician because he or she is so plain spoken. I mean, do we really want people representing us that
Yes,
are
because,
not as smart as
yes,
us?
because we like people who reflect us.
Yeah.
Yes, not as smart, but just
Like
as
I want
smart.
my doctor to be smarter, my dentist to be smarter, my teachers to be smarter. I mean, I want my carpenter, I
No,
want my
you-
plumber to be smarter. Absolutely. I'm paying them.
Yeah, but
I've got a plumber coming today.
okay,
and
but when we're
I
talking,
don't want him to be like me.
when we're talking about the toughest job in the world, we're talking about general expertise.
100%.
and
The
people
toughest job
don't-
in the world, way tougher than a plumber.
And people don't
And
like.
people think Donald Trump's the man for the job.
People don't like the smartest kid in the class.
No.
People don't
Repub-
like the smartest
So
person.
certain personalities don't. See, I would push back on that. I wonder, is it everyone that doesn't like the smarty pants, or is it just a lot of people who don't like the smarty pants? Because I mean, look,
A lot of people.
yes, it is true that the nerd in school doesn't always get the cheerleader. However, nerds do grow up to own companies. Nerds do grow up to become engineers. Nerds grow up to become doctors, and everybody loves them at that point. Like,
Yeah.
don't we want nerds? Don't we need nerds? Don't we really have a lot of room for nerds? Or is that just
well,
everywhere
I
except
can,
politics?
I can tell you that some of our most. It depends. I think political knowledge and being a good politician is very, very different.
Yeah.
I think our most intelligent president was likely, it's debatable, but John Quincy Adams.
Mm-hmm.
Whew, guy was a genius.
Yeah.
Genius. You know, he was
Not very popular.
He was an ambassador to Russia, or not. He was, a diplomat
Right.
when he was 14.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
how'd he make it? Daddy?
Oh no! I
Legacy?
mean, no. He was brilliant and engaging.
Oh, okay.
Every single person who would come over to the United States in the early 1800s,
Just enamored by
it had to be. That was one thing you had to do
Mhm.
is you had to go see JQA. You had to go talk to him about America, about his ideas on,
So he had it
on
all.
governance. He was an incredible. He had a great. Yeah, he had it
Yeah.
all until he was president. He was a horrible president.
Yeah, yeah.
Because he was a lot of times smart people are not good
Mhm.
at
Communicating to the masses. And,
humility, humbling themselves.
Or being or coming across authentic, perhaps.
No, I think they're authentic. I think they're just austere.
I mean, I
think
never
they're
thought Al
just-
Gore was authentic. I didn't really think John Kerry was that authentic, even though I believe that they were telling the truth. They didn't
See,
come
they were very.
across as though.
Well, that's sort of my point. Right? They were extremely smart. I think Hillary
Just-
Clinton is
yeah,
a brilliant
but
woman.
maybe a little too
But
pedantic,
then
a little
but then,
too
yeah, there you go.
too cerebral.
And I think Barack Obama struggled with that. I think he was a fantastic orator,
Well, you
but
know,
I think he struggled with that at times.
maybe that's why I got 28,000 views on our Facebook page, reel, a short clip, but the most listens I've ever gotten on a podcast is 200, and it was probably because neither you or I were speaking.
Which one was that?
That was Bob's first one, by the way.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
His, growing up with cystic fibrosis. But yeah, it's a shame. The long form. I view this, what we're doing right now, as the long form. Most people in media, in radio, say that this is the hardest thing to do. It's the hardest thing to sort of make a living at. It's the hardest thing to get people sort of on board with, is listening to someone talk for an hour or more. So in that respect, I have to give Joe Rogan props.
More
right?
people need to exercise.
Yeah. But opposite is the case. If we were simply just pumping out TikTok videos of 15 seconds with just extremely emotional, dramatic sort of sound bites and explicit, very emotionally laden video clips, we could get thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
Yeah, it's very weird.
Isn't
So it's
that
like that long form suits people who are using the more the more evolved part of the brain, so to speak, the more pedantic, the more analytical, the more rational, and those short forms definitely trigger the emotional, the amygdalic, the immediate visceral parts of the brain.
Yeah. And, it's like Helen Keller said, right? People do not like to think.
No.
Thinking leads to conclusions, and conclusions are not always
Well,
pleasant.
no, to prove that you don't like to think, I ask my students sometimes, I'm like, what is 2 times 2? And immediately they all yell 4. And then I say, what is 17 times 21? And nobody answers. And then a few minutes go by and no one answers. And then 50 minutes later, when the class is over,
Yeah, but numbers,
they walk out the door and
but-
no one
but-
ever answers.
but-
But how hard would that have been for someone
But numbers
to figure it out, but no one ever has.
But numbers are unpleasant. The end result of that isn't unpleasant. What I mean about
it's the process.
What I'm talking about thinking, I'm saying I don't want to think about why certain things. I don't want to think about gun violence because I don't want those answers. Right?
I thought
don't
it was
want
just
those
because it was
conclusions.
hard. You know, in psychology, we think it's just because it's hard.
It is hard to think.
Takes
That is
calories,
true.
Takes energy,
That
right?
is true.
Like
That is
people
true.
don't get on the treadmill and read like Wuthering Heights. They get on the treadmill and watch TikTok videos. I mean, if you've ever tried
That is
to
true.
exercise
But I have
and do
seen
something
people
super
read
cerebral,
on a treadmill, which is weird.
yeah,
That is
it's
weird.
probably not like differential equations
No,
or
it's just-
high economic theory. It's probably something lowbrow.
But that is interesting. You said that. Yeah, I've actually heard, and speaking of President Trump, it is a very effective strategy, psychologically speaking.
Yeah.
And you can speak to this
Come out and say, "Hey, I don't read."
to just keep lying. No, really though, it is.
No, I think Mein Kampf. I think Hitler talked about that in
There
Mein
is
Kampf.
a mental exhaustion
Tell
that comes
lies
with
all the time.
refuting lies.
Yeah,
And just if you just
just keep
continue
spouting
to
them out.
lie,
Yeah.
and then at some point, I think people just resign themselves to, well, there's got to be something somewhere.
what
that
did
might-
Adolf Hitler say in Mein Kampf?
I have
Lie
no idea.
often and lie big.
I don't think he said that.
I'm pretty sure.
I doubt he said that.
I wish we
That
had Bob
really
Brennan
doesn't-
around.
That really doesn't
could
sound like
Look that
Adolf
up. I
Hitler.
feel like I've
All right.
heard that before.
We'll take a break. I'll look that up, and then let's do some rapid fire stuff, and we'll put the 2024 presidential campaign through the ringer.
Brag with drag, I'm amazed and astonished. The problem is a lot of brains, but no polish. I gotta holler just to be heard with every word. I drop knowledge. I'm a diamond in the rough. A shining piece of coal trying to reach my
And
goal.
we're back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Put 'em on the Cast. I'm your host, Jason McCoy.
We'll put him on the couch.
As always, put 'em on the cast. Put 'em on the
Put
couch.
him on the couch. That was Goebbels, by the way. Joseph Goebbels.
Joseph Goebbels, somebody with Hitler
If you
said,
tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it.
yeah. Who said lie often if you're going to lie? Did Hitler say you should lie often?
I don't know.
Anyway,
Sounds like Trump's mantra.
it sounds exactly
Mantra.
like Trump's mantra. He doesn't tell super big lies.
Oh,
well, actually, he does those too.
He
doesn't he?
lies. He lies a lot. I don't know if he knows he's lying, but that doesn't really matter, does it?
No, I don't think he knows because the narcissist doesn't have insight, right?
All right, let's go. Let's do the questions, brother.
Rapid fire.
Rapid fire, man.
What am I supposed to ask you?
Oh, come on. You had some good ones earlier.
Oh, I see. If you were a political pundit
Okay.
and you were trying to use comedy to help someone's campaign, what style would you encourage them to use?
Sarcasm.
Stand up, physical comedy.
I wouldn't say miming. Well, that could get interesting. If you could mime what you were trying to do, like feed the poor children.
Yeah,
I don't know.
If you, how about this? If you were advising someone who was sort of fading fast in the presidential campaign, and there
So
was
Ron DeSantis.
and there was a dinner party,
Yeah.
and it was going to be filmed. What would you suggest Ron DeSantis order at that dinner party?
Oh shoot, something normal. Yeah, that would be hard for him. Ron DeSantis at a dinner party.
We order a Budweiser and a burger that's like really greasy and filled with cheese and
A meatball. Meatballs. I would tell him to order meatballs because you know what? People like self-deprecation.
Yeah.
Meatballs, meatball run.
Lastly, if the presidential candidates in the last debate, instead of standing behind a podium and sparring verbally with one another, they literally came out to an MMA cage fight. Which song do you think Donald Trump would be playing when he came out?
Which song do I think
What
Donald
would his
Trump?
walkout music be if he was coming out to his cage match?
Man, I don't. I have no idea. What do you? I have no idea. A song for Donald Trump in a cage match. Enter the Sandman.
Enter Sandman,
Yeah,
Metallica.
don't you think?
Probably. I already know what he'd come out to.
What would he come?
Oh,
up-
he'd come out to one of those Lee Greenwood songs, man. God bless America, or proud to be an American.
Oh yeah,
You know
I
he
guess,
would.
I guess.
It'd be Hank Williams Jr. again. I'm not going to play it. Don't worry. You don't have to take me down.
Oh please don't.
Lee Greenwood. It'd be one of those. Toby Keith.
That'd be
man.
fun. What about what was the truth serum question we were talking about off air?
Oh yeah, I
What
said
was
if
the truth serum?
yeah, if there was a debate and the politicians were injected with truth serum right before the debate, what would they say if you asked them, the following questions?
Well, what
right?
question would you ask?
I'll give you.
Yeah, give me a.
Are you really a Republican?
Haley would. They'd both say yes.
Okay.
They'd both say yes.
Are you really afraid of woke liberalism?
Nikki would say no. Ron would say, I don't know. I think Ron would say yes. I guess. I don't know.
Do you really believe books on shelves in libraries can make your children gay or anything else?
They would both say no.
Yeah. Do you believe that politicians really matter?
They would both say yes.
Yeah. Do you believe that we spend too much money on education in this country?
They would both no. They would both say no.
Yeah.
Because I think they would want it spent at the local level and the state level. They would want to grant a lot of money back to the states and put those programs in the state. They both say no. I don't think.
Are you sexually attracted to one another?
They both say yes. They both say yes. No, I don't think so. They look like they absolutely hate each other.
Do you?
But I guess hate doesn't.
Do you enjoy sex?
I'm not even. I have no idea. You know what? I will give them the benefit of the doubt.
Would you love your children if you found out they were gay?
Yeah, I think they'd both say yes.
Do you believe transsexuals are going to heaven?
I think they would both say. I think Ron would say, "I don't believe. I'm an atheist," and I think Nikki would say yes.
Interesting. I really do wish we had some truth serum.
Wouldn't that be fun, man?
It really would. So here's the question. Would we find out that people really are more alike than they're different?
Yeah, because what you would find is that people all across America agree on the problems, 100%. Like if you were to go,
and isn't that at least the best place, if not the only place to start? You got to start there, really. You
yeah,
got to at least agree upon the problem.
Yeah, it goes off the rails pretty quick. But I think if you talk to a conservative, a gun rights, gun-toting redneck, and you said, "Do you think gun violence in America is a problem?" They would say yes.
Yeah.
They would say absolutely yes. If you talk to a latte-sipping, Prius-driving, far lefty hippie,
they'd say yes.
And you said, "Do you believe that the situation at the southern border is problematic and we need to do something about illegal immigration?" Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, they'd say yes. So I think everybody agrees that
they just have to save face.
They all no, I don't think they have to save. I don't think they need the truth serum. I think everybody would agree that these are the problems. But
why aren't they? Why aren't they agreeing?
They do.
I don't hear them on television. Do we just not give people enough time to get there?
What we do is we take one crazy person who says it's not even an issue, and then we make the rest of the party answer for that, and we hold that example up. Like, look, I like.
So people that are saying the Republican Party is gone, and it's never coming back. You don't agree with that?
Oh, I didn't say
that. The MAGA
say
types
that.
have taken it over and it's gone. It's never coming back. So your granddad's Republican Party is never ever coming back. That sounds like a Taylor Swift song, by the way.
No, I don't. I think it's never ever getting back together.
Yeah.
No, I don't think that's the case. It depends on what unfolds over the next. Look, the MAGA movement is a movement, and it came out of nowhere. Well, it didn't come out of nowhere. It started with the Tea Party movement in 2010. It's only been 14 years. I mean, you're telling me things are going to be a certain way 14 years from now? That's ridiculous. You have no idea. Nobody has any idea what new movement is going. I think there is room in the country for a kindness movement, for a decency movement.
Yeah, how do we get there?
The same way
Unless
you do
another
with
country
President
invades
Trump.
us.
No, the same way you do with President Trump. It's not about ideas. It's about people who express them and lead us. And that's what leadership is all about, right? Because the ideas are always there. We have a million good ways to fix this country. A million good ways to inject new life into the political system.
But the quickest way, wouldn't you admit, is if every single man, woman, and child in Canada
grabs
a stick, and a jug of maple syrup.
They all
hops on a horse.
They already
and
have
invades America.
They already have sticks.
If they
play
invade
hockey.
America with those hockey sticks and a jug of maple syrup, we will all come together and unite against those pesky poutine-eating Canadians.
No, we'll blame Joe Biden for not securing the
the southern border. Yeah, we'll
the
blame
northern
for not
border. Do you know what? You know what President Trump calls Canadians?
Lesser Americans or something about Americans, doesn't he?
Snow Mexicans.
What? Not for real.
No, but it sounds like it could be real, doesn't it? And therein lies the problem. It does sound like doesn't that sound like something he might have once said? Like if you had to bet money that did President Trump ever call Canadians snow Mexicans, where would you put your money? You had the bet.
I would say 0%, just because he wouldn't use Mexican. He'd use something even more derogatory, probably.
Snow aliens?
There you go. Yeah.
By the way, this is just a quick aside. I hate, like it grates on me when people use the term A, illegal alien, or B, illegals.
Oh, yeah.
Illegal. You cannot be illegal.
Something you're doing might be illegal.
The grammar is awful. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, you can do something illegal. Like a murderer
people have
is
trouble
not illegal.
People have trouble with nouns, verbs, and adjectives. I mean,
no, they
let's just
don't.
call
No,
it
they don't. They're
a spade.
It's dehumanizing language. They don't have trouble. They do it. No, I don't do it.
That person's a schizophrenic. That person's a depressive.
That's not dehumanizing language. That's
I think
descriptive
it is 100%.
language.
But there's no such thing as a schizophrenic. It's a person with schizophrenia.
Okay.
You're not a cancer if you're afflicted with prostate cancer.
Okay.
But anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll
leave that for another day. So I've talked a lot about politics and political science.
Mm-hmm.
And you've mentioned schizophrenia. It can only mean one thing. It is time to diagnose American politics. And I want to preface this by saying we plan on putting both presidential nominees on the couch sometime this summer, right before the conventions, I think would be good. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
So we want to make sure you save space and column inches for your diagnosis of the political candidates. What would you diagnose politics? And let's talk just about American politics. What would you diagnose American politics with?
I would probably give American politics a diagnosis of intoxication.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I feel like we
So
are
wouldn't that
under
be-
the influence.
So substance abuse disorder?
Yeah, but not abuse necessarily. I don't think they're necessarily abusing, but I do think we are in a perpetual state of intoxication.
Okay.
Both parties, or all parties for that matter, are in a state of intoxication. Here's why I think that. When you are intoxicated by a substance that can alter your consciousness to the degree to which it would rise to the level of substance intoxication, it has incredible mind-altering effects, right? To include but not be limited to things like making you myopic and narrow-minded, making you more or less courageous, making you more or less anxious, making you more or less paranoid, making you more or less gregarious or talkative. And I think I see the same thing in the American political system. Always has been and probably always will be. It's almost like different people, different politicians get a hold of different drugs that create these different states of consciousness. And maybe that explains why when we talk about the Republican Party of old never coming back, maybe they've just taken a new drug and they like it. And by the way,
Maybe.
even before our father's Republican Party, there was our great, great, great forebears Republican Party, right? The party of Lincoln, we used to hear, oh, this party's not the party of Lincoln.
Right.
Well, no,
Right.
no, we do change, and it doesn't have to be for the better.
Right.
It's just the particular drug that the masses are taking at that moment.
And you'd
right?
say the Democratic Party is the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome
Intoxication.
diagnosis, Doc.
Hey, thanks, man.
All right, man.
Well, that's all I've got.
With a guest.
I want a new drug.
Here.
Later.
When the woman is sick,